The evening of May 31st, 1921, just after 10 p.m., marked the beginning of an unparalleled bloodbath that claimed the lives of 300 black people, left 800 injured, and over 6,000 people homeless. With all hell breaking loose, the once thriving community of Black Wall Street was reduced to rubble and debris, leaving behind a trail of destruction that would forever change the dynamics of history. Looking back at the last 48 hours, we can see precisely how this devastating event came to be. The story of Black Wall Street began in the early 1900s when a thriving community of black entrepreneurs and business owners had established themselves in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, bringing about the name Black Wall Street due to the prosperity and success of the black-owned businesses that operated there. The neighborhood was a beacon of hope and success for African Americans who had faced systemic racism and discrimination for centuries. However, tensions between Tulsa's white and black communities had been simmering for years, fueled by segregation and discrimination. But these tensions came to a head on May 30th, 1921, just 48 hours before the tragic downfall of Black Wall Street. In the early hours of the day, the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was enveloped in a somber mood as citizens of all races came together to honor the fallen heroes of the United States. For the black community in particular, it was a rare opportunity to share in the collective grief of their white counterparts, even though the prevalent racism of the era ensured that segregation was still enforced during the shared moment of mourning. The Memorial Day commemoration would have been a day of solemn reflection, but it soon took a tragic turn. The streets were relatively empty as most shops, businesses, and offices remained closed. In this quiet atmosphere, a rumor began to circulate about a black man who was accused of assaulting a white woman in an elevator. The rumor involved a 19-year-old black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland, who needed to use the restroom during the Memorial Day parade. Dick Rowland made his way to the Drexel building, which was located near his workplace at the Shine Parlor on Main Street. He headed to the top floor to use the colored restroom, the only facility available to black people then. While he was in the elevator on his way up, he encountered Sarah Page, a 17-year-old white girl who operated the elevator. Rowland and Page were familiar with each other due to his routine visits in the colored restroom, but the exact nature of their relationship is still unclear. However, something happened in that elevator that would change the course of history, leaving a catastrophic consequence for the entire black community. Although the details of the incident are still a mystery, it is known that Rowland was accused of assaulting Page, despite a lack of evidence. According to witnesses, a clerk working at Renberg's on the building's first floor heard a blood-curdling scream from the elevator. Alarmed by the noise, he rushed to the source of the commotion, only to find a startled Dick Rowland hastily fleeing the scene and a distraught Sarah Page still inside the elevator. Fearing the worst, the clerk concluded that Rowland had sexually molested Page and immediately notified the authorities. Other theories have been proposed, including the possibility that Rowland may have lost his balance and reached out to Page for support, promoting her to scream in alarm. Some have even suggested that Rowland and Page may have been lovers who had a falling out. Whatever the truth may be, things weren't looking good for Rowland. Despite Page's reluctance to press charges or any official statement on the issue, rumors quickly spread amongst the white community that Rowland had attempted to rape her, causing widespread panic and outrage. Although Rowland was initially cleared of any wrongdoing by the police, he was far from safe. As a black man living in a time when racial discrimination was rampant, many members of the white community viewed his very existence as a threat. In their eyes, he was guilty simply by virtue of his race and deserving of the most severe punishment. Faced with the real threat of being lynched by an angry mob, Rowland made the difficult decision to flee to the relative safety of the Greenwood neighborhood, also known as Black Wall Street. In the early hours of May 31st, Rowland was located by 2 police officers and taken into custody. His arrest, which many in the white community had been demanding, was seen as a triumph of justice. However, the events that unfolded in the aftermath of Dick Rowland's arrest would prove to be nothing short of catastrophic for the residents of the Greenwood neighborhood. Shortly after his arrest, an anonymous phone call was made to the police commissioner, J.M. Atkinson, threatening Rowland's life. Fearing for the prisoner's safety, Atkinson decided to transfer Rowland to a more secure jail on the top floor of the Tulsa County Courthouse. Little did he know that this decision would spark a flame of violence and destruction that would ruin the Greenwood neighborhood. Over the next 18 hours, the white community would launch a brutal attack on the once thriving black community, destroying houses, businesses, and lives in an orgy of violence and hatred. As the day wore on, the situation in Tulsa grew increasingly intense. Fears for the safety of Rowland had spread throughout the community. Just a year earlier, a white man named Roy Belton had been lynched for hijacking a white man's car, leading to concerns that Roland, a black man, might suffer a similar fate. Despite the claims of some who knew Roland and believed in his innocence, their voices were drowned out by the anger of the white community. The news of Roland's arrest and the potential for a lynching spread rapidly, with the Tulsa Tribune running an inflammatory headline that read "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator," and an editorial that ominously warned of a possible lynching titled "To Lynch Negro Tonight." The newspaper hit the streets in the early afternoon, and the community grew more agitated. Local authorities were alerted to the situation and went on standby at 4 p.m. as more and more white residents gathered outside the Tulsa County Courthouse, where Roland was being held. By 7:30 p.m., hundreds of white residents had amassed outside the courthouse, appearing to form a lynch mob. To protect Roland, the newly elected sheriff's deputies formed a defensive perimeter around him, with some officers stationed on the courthouse roof, armed with rifles and shotguns. The elevator was disabled to prevent the crowd from reaching Roland, and police officers barricaded the stairs with orders to shoot any intruder in sight. The sheriff attempted to address the crowd and persuade them to disperse, but his appeals fell on deaf ears. As the situation grew more volatile, 3 white men entered the courthouse, demanding that they hand over Roland to them, but the sheriff turned them away. Meanwhile, members of the black community gathered at a nearby hotel in the Greenwood district to discuss how to protect Roland. They eventually decided to join forces with the police to defend Roland, arming themselves with guns and ammunition in preparation for a possible confrontation. At around 9:30 p.m. on May 31st, 1921, a group of armed black men arrived at the county courthouse jail in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They intended to assist the sheriff in defending Roland. Still, the arrival of black men, armed with shotguns and rifles, caused alarm among the white residents of Tulsa, who also began arming themselves. As the night progressed, the white crowd at the courthouse grew to around 2,000, with many of them armed and ready to fight their way to Roland. Despite the efforts of prominent leaders such as Reverend Charles W. Kerr and the sheriff of police to disperse the crowd, tensions continued to rise. Meanwhile, the black community in the nearby Greenwood district was anxious and concerned for Roland's safety. More armed black men soon arrived at the courthouse to protect Roland, further heightening tensions between the two groups. The presence of armed black men was seen by many white residents as a possible sign of a Negro uprising. This fear was compounded by rumors that some white residents attempted to force themselves into the courthouse jail. In response, several other black men went to the jail to offer their support to the sheriff. As the situation spiraled out of control, the sheriffs were reluctant to accept support from the black men, fearing it would escalate the situation further. Despite some black men insisting they were asked to help by the sheriff denied any such request. As tensions continued to mount, a seemingly violent request by a white man for a black veteran's gun would be the spark that ignited the violence. In an attempt to forcibly disarm the veteran, a gunshot rang out, triggering an almost immediate exchange of fire. This gunfire would lead to the tragic death of 12 people, 10 white men and 2 black men. Following the incident, the black men who had offered protection for Roland were forced to retreat to the relative safety of Greenwood District. However, the white mob began to follow the black men back to their homes in Greenwood District, with some looting the armory for more weapons and ammunition. The situation quickly deteriorated as the white mobs began to indiscriminately shoot any black person they saw on their way to Black Wall Street, causing panic and chaos. As the violence escalated, the National Guard was deployed to subdue the rioters and protect public facilities, the courthouse, and the police station. However, the larger group of white mobs continued to fight and kill, with a small white group gathering at the courthouse and demanding that Roland be released for lynching. By the early hours of June 1st, the situation had escalated into a full-blown riot, with the white mob setting fire to black businesses in Archer and Greenwood, and by 4 a.m., it was reported that 24 black businesses had been burned to the ground, with firefighters unable to gain access to extinguish the flames. As tensions continued to boil over, the racial conflict intensified, with more black residents ready to defend their neighborhood and white supremacists determined to maintain dominance, while many were forced to flee for their lives, leaving behind everything they had worked so hard to build. The mid-morning brought a renewed wave of violence, with the sound of gunshots and screams filling the air as homes and businesses were set ablaze. The situation escalated into a deadly gunfight, further fueling the chaos and destruction. Over the next few hours, the black residents of Greenwood District were subjected to horrific acts of violence. Many were beaten, lynched, or burned alive, while others were forced into detention centers. Despite some black residents' courageous efforts to fight against the violence and destruction, the magnitude of the attack was too overwhelming. In a display of extreme brutality, the white mobs resorted to using airplanes to drop bombs on buildings and indiscriminately shooting black residents of Wall Street. By the morning of June 1st, the once thriving Black Wall Street lay in ruins with over 35 blocks burned to the ground and countless lives lost. The violent massacre and racial conflict would continue to rage until 11:49 a.m., when the general of the Oklahoma National Guard finally stepped in and declared martial law. Sadly, the damage had already been done. By the time the violence had subsided, hundreds of black residents had been killed, with an estimated death toll of 300 and 800 more injured. The once vibrant Greenwood district had also been reduced to a smoldering wasteland, with homes and businesses destroyed beyond recognition. The aftermath of the Tulsa massacre was heart-wrenching and a devastating setback to the black community, both in Tulsa and across the nation. The violence inflicted upon the innocent black residents of Greenwood District was nothing short of a tragedy, leaving a deep and lasting scar in the community. Families were left homeless and ruined, and the black community of Tulsa was left traumatized and devastated. The destruction of Black Wall Street is a reminder of the deep-seated racism and discrimination that still existed in America. The tragic loss of life was an important reminder of the pressing need for racial justice, unity, and equality. Today, the legacy of Black Wall Street lives on as a testament to the tenacity and strength of the black community. When we stick together and build our own, we don't need them, they need us. Thank you for watching this documentary. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support the movement. We also have some links in the description if you'd like to further support us. We aren't just telling stories, we're changing lives and waking the culture up. Speaking of that, the video on the screen is another crazy story with some hidden information they never taught us in school. Click on it now. We'll see you over there.